Hello everybody, my name is Average Election Enjoyer today on April 22nd of 2026, and I'm going to be breaking down the results from the Virginia Redistricting Referendum that we saw occurring yesterday. Today is in fact Wednesday. Yesterday was Tuesday the 21st, and that is when we saw this election take place here. As you can see, it is passing currently by 3 points, with 3% of the vote still remaining. This is likely going to be breaking Democratic, as these last expected votes were expected to, but it's not going to change the margin by any significant amount. It's going to be just a little bit more than 3 points margin here. So a very close election, or referendum in this case, that we see here. And if we see this map, you could see purple no, orange is yes. We're going to be comparing it to the governor's election that we saw occur last year, as well as the presidential election in 2024 here. So first of all, I want to break down how the votes were cast. You can see election day votes 53 to 47, it broke for no. So the no, which is the Republican backed on this issue, the background on this issue is that this was going to draw what was a 6-5 split in the Virginia congressional delegation, is now going to be 10-1 in favor of the Democrats. So this was another battle in this redistricting war that we are having, that started in Texas, went to California, went to Ohio and Missouri, and then now it's ended up here in Virginia. Florida is going to potentially be drawing a map, even though recent special elections there has sort of put a damper on if the party really wants to redraw, because that could easily turn into a dummy mandate if they're not careful there in Florida. So, but that is the issue here. And yes, was Democratic aligned voting to redistrict? No, was of course voting to keep the congressional delegation that they had here. And this was a very close election, significantly closer than the Virginia gubernatorial election. But again, as we can break down the votes, no, so the Republicans, I guess you could say in this case, but no actually won the election day votes, though it was a very close margin. If no wanted to win in this referendum, they would have had to win election day votes by a much more significant margin. Early in-person votes, yes, won by literally the exact same margin. They just flipped here. That's pretty funny. That is 53-47, 53-47. But for yes, and then of course yes dominated early by male votes here, as is expected. And if we compare it to the blowout that occurred last year, if we look at the votes, we could see that Spanberger, the Democrat, won all 3 categories last time. But as you can see, there are some clear positions where that show, I think, Democratic strength in Virginia. Even though this was a close election, I don't think that this is a good result for the GOP in any sort of way, and I will be explaining that throughout the video. So as you can see, in election day votes, Spanberger won 54-46 against the Republican, which is even more than the Republican, or than no won the election day votes in this referendum. And you can see that she won, she made gains in both of these categories as well. However, I think that where this is not so good of a sign for the Republicans is how they're only able to really make a difference in the election day votes here, and that this was the results that were really expected to flip. If you saw Republicans making inroads in early in-person votes or early vote by mail votes, you could see them actually starting to maybe flip some more moderate Democrats here. that's what you would have been seeing is if they were improving in these sorts of margins. See, it only goes 77-22 versus 73-27. That is not too much of a difference in these early by mail votes here. Especially for a state like Virginia, which may have a vestige of some sort of more moderate Democratic voters than what you might see. They had a Republican governor as recently as last year, so if you wanted to see Republicans potentially being able to flip things in Virginia, you'd want to see them winning more of these moderate Democrats, and that is not what these results are sort of indicating. It indicates they were able to win a few moderate Democrats, especially where you saw their biggest performances, which would be in the south of Virginia here and west of Virginia here. You see in this area. Republicans actually in several counties had more turnout than they did in the gubernatorial election here in a few of these counties. I'm going to see if I can find an example here. Yeah, just as an example here, if you look at Buchanan County, you can see that Republicans had 4,628 total votes. In this county for an 88-11 margin, almost 12, 88-12 virtually in this county. But if we go to this election, you can see it was 82-18 with Earl Sears receiving 4,421 votes there. And you can see the Democrats lost 300 votes from this referendum as compared to Republicans gaining 200 votes about. And that is where you saw the Republicans able to really do well in this election, really make it close, is they were able to win and turn out a lot of these more rural voters. However, even in this best case scenario, where gerrymandering is a very unpopular issue, it is an issue that you might actually be able to see in a state that is going further and further to the left, like Virginia. Republicans could have potentially had an opportunity to actually win here. So the fact that they weren't able to at least to make it even closer or to win in a proposition like this is not a good sign for the Republicans. Another sign that is really quite disastrous is the fact that they got absolutely annihilated in Fairfax and Loudoun and Prince William. In terms of margins that they needed to win, they needed to do better in these counties by much more than they ended up doing, and these are what ended up costing them the election. Because at the end of this election, or with about 70% of the vote in, no was actually leading. However, the last 30% of the vote was all in basically Fairfax County. With its almost 400,000, 300,000, 700 or 377,000 total votes coming from out of there. 378,000 actually votes coming out of Fairfax County for this election. They needed to do at least a few points better. They needed to get to at least 33 or 34 points if they wanted to win in this election, and they did not. They, in fact, struggled. Democrats didn't get the margins that they got in 2025. However, with such a controversial topic, as I said, you did see some more moderate Democrats likely voting against this referendum, and even more likely outcome, I believe, is a lot of them just staying home. You saw a lot of Democrats staying home on issues like this because they don't support gerrymandering, and they won't vote for an amendment. But to see Democrats still taking out a victory in a state like Virginia that has been close in past elections, able to put such a radical topic through and pass it statewide, is not a good sign for Republicans looking for the future of the state here. And if we compare that to 2024, you can see that this is a much more comparable margin with 51.8 to 46.1 as compared to 51.5 to 48.5. You can see that Harris and Yes almost got a very similar margin, only 0.3 off. The main difference is Republicans gaining about more than 3 points here. Sorry, more than 2 points here, 2.4 points total, versus the Democrats losing 0.3 points. That's where you saw the narrowing, is you saw a lot more votes to no versus votes. But that is because there's no real third parties in these ones versus there are third parties in presidential elections. You have yeah, there you go. This is where all the rest of the margin went there. But you could see that these were similar margins. Actually, you could see that the Yes Amendment did better in Fairfax County than it did for Kamala Harris here. Loudoun County, similar thing. This is just bad sign for the Republicans. Prince William 57, 62. Yeah, this is a bad sign for the Republicans here. If even on a divisive issue like gerrymandering, where you are having the opportunity to win more moderate Democratic voters here, you're doing worse than Trump's margin. That's a concern if you want to see a Republican win in Virginia in the foreseeable future. Just this area here, this is, 140,000. This is 380,000. Another 150,000 here. This is like 600,000 people. That's a significant chunk of the voting population here. This is about 3 million. It's like over a sixth or over a fifth of total voters here that are voting at over 60% for the Democrats here. Plus, there's some smaller counties in there too, Arlington, Alexandria as well. Just this area is like a fourth of the vote total, around a fourth of the vote total here. So this is not a result you want to be seeing. If you're the Republicans, you got to be doing better in these margins, and that is what's going to probably be hurting the Republicans in some of their in especially Virginia and in other places, is how they are losing these urban voters. That has been the trend, is that Republicans can do as well as they want to with these rural voters, and they can do well with the rural voters, but if they're struggling with these suburban voters and especially urban voters, they're losing by disastrous margins in close races in these cities. It's gonna make up for all these rural counties that they even managed to turn out extra in. If they didn't manage to get rural turnout to be higher than it was, then they were going to lose in this issue by even higher of a margin than 3 points, which would be a fairly bad result here. But the one good takeaway, if you're a Republican, from this election is that rural turnout was better than expected, which this was probably closer than a lot of people were expecting. This is about where I saw it. I thought it was going to be somewhat close, but it was still going to be a margin where you weren't going to look back on it and say that was an absolute nail biter. It was fairly apparent who's going to win when the results started coming in. So this is sort of in the ballpark. I was thinking 3 to 6 point margin for the yes. So it was on the low end, but it was within what I expected here. And if you look at these other rural counties here, 53-46, so you can see the Democrats did underperform in some of these other more urban counties around Richmond. They lost a couple of these, especially they lost a lot of swing counties, but they were able to hold, I think, 2 of them. There were like 16 swing counties that went from Trump to, that went from Glenn Youngkin that Spanberger was able to flip, and all but 2 of them went back to in the no column. However, on such a divisive issue, if Democrats are winning these swing counties, that's just another problem that Republicans are going to have to face in this state here. So just this is Republicans were able to overperform even in these more urban areas as well, but just this is going to be a problem for the future of any Republican trying to win um, statewide. Is there just it's going to be very difficult if just the DC suburbs come out and keep swinging further and further to the left. It's going to be a major problem for any, as I said, Republican candidates there. Um, yeah. If you look at the margins here, you got Richmond City, but if you look at Henrico County, this is in 2024. Look at Henrico County; it's similar margins in 2020. You can see that I think Democrats improved. Yeah, Democrats improved ever so slightly. Chesterfield 53.6, 53.6. Democrats performed about just a little bit worse in Chesterfield. So Democrats were able to basically keep their 2024 margins in a lot of these more suburban, still large districts here, more populated districts. It's just in these DC suburbs that have swung hard to the left ever since Trump's second presidency. This is just going to be, and on an issue so divisive as redistricting, if Republicans were unable to win this referendum, I don't see how they're going to be able to win really any statewide elections in Virginia anytime soon, barring something absolutely absurd happening to one of the candidates, or even in 2025 there was a really controversial candidate, Jay Jones, for Attorney General, who still won by over 6 points, I believe. It's gonna be pretty difficult for Republicans to win here, and just nationwide as a whole. If Republicans are gonna just get annihilated in all these urban districts, it's going to make winning in Georgia really difficult, in North Carolina really difficult, and Ohio has a lot of urban, really urban counties. If Democrats can turn those out, they might be able to make Ohio close again, if they're able to really get all those urban centers turning out. Ohio's really the biggest state. That's an example of rural versus urban. And if urban's really voting left, that could make Ohio start swinging back, especially if Democrats start doing better with suburban voters, like they've been trending for a while. They've been starting to win suburbs. So, yeah, interesting results we see here from this Virginia redistricting referendum. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.